From the best in the business to ones who weren't afraid to get clever, here are 8 of the smartest smugglers ever. Number 8. Homing pigeons. When it comes to smuggling drugs, anything is viable as long as it works, including using pigeons to get the job done. Do remember that at one time, carrier pigeons were the method of travel and communication for some, and that's where the name homing pigeons came from, because they could be trained to deliver messages and come back without much effort. And eventually, this was applied to the drug trade all over the world to a startling effect. For example, in 2017, Kua officials had found out that local drug lords were using homing pigeons to try and get pills and such to various people. And when they caught one of these pigeons, they found it had a tiny backpack attached to it, one that had 178 pills within the pouch. Given the going rate of certain drugs, that's thousands of dollars of product that this bird was carrying. In 2015, guards in Costa Rica found a pigeon smuggling cocaine, and in 2011, in Colombia, someone tried to attach a very heavy package of drugs to a pigeon, and that made it unable to fly over a prison wall and thus got caught. There's little doubt that many successful smuggling operations use pigeons because they're easy to ignore, and capturing them isn't easy. Number 7. Osiel Cárdenas Guillén. The man known as Osiel Cárdenas Guillén, aka the Friend Killer, may be in a Texas prison right now, but in his prime, he was one of the deadliest and most powerful smugglers in the world. Guillén was the leader of the Gulf Cartel after he killed his friend, who was next in line for leadership. Under his guidance, the Gulf Cartel began a bloody crusade to assert themselves as one of the top dogs of the war that was going on in Mexico. But what separated Osiel Cárdenas Guillén was that he was able to bribe and corrupt those who had been deemed incorruptible in the past, including the Mexican Special Forces branch of the military, and he then went and hired a personal mercenary army that would go along with his product to make sure it would go where it needed to go. His numbers allowed him to make lots of money and have a ton of reach, which he used to great effect. The only reason that his operation eventually failed was because he threatened the wrong people. Specifically, he threatened some DEA agents and got the US government involved, and thus Osiel was arrested. But his forces still remain, and they're still causing havoc and smuggling drugs in his absences. Number 6. Griselda Blanco. There's a common misconception in the drug world that all the main leaders are men, but Griselda Blanco was one woman who was not only smart, but successful in the drug smuggling trade. In fact, she was the mentor to Pablo Escobar for a time and taught him many of her tricks before he betrayed her. Griselda Blanco was one of the best smugglers in the world. She started her career out small, mainly by using her clothing and creating various ways to smuggle drugs in and out of places by them. She set up shop first in Queens, New York, and created a rather large-scale operation as a result. Blanco fled to Colombia, then went to Miami, Florida to start everything up again once the government got wise. She took on the Miami cartels head-on when she arrived. All the while, she would be smuggling untold amounts of cocaine into the country, helping cement her godmother status and proving that she was not to be messed with. She wasn't, until she was gunned down by a motorcycle rider one day, a method she had used herself to take down other rivals in the past. Number 5. Drug submarines. Also known as narco submarines, these aquatic crafts are meant to be one of the most sophisticated means of getting products to where they're supposed to go. The submersibles they make are capable of quite a long range and can sometimes carry up to 11 tons of product, which is worth millions of dollars. Granted, at the beginning of this plan to make subs, their submersibles were handcrafted in such a way that failure was the only option. But with each year that passed, they grew more sophisticated, to the extent that when the first one was caught by the US Coast Guard, it was dubbed Bigfoot because they couldn't believe it was real. Fast forward to the year 2008, and the Coast Guard was detecting about 10 submersibles a month, but because of their depth and their speed, only caught about one of them, with everything still intact. The drug cartels are even willing to scuttle the ship once they're done because they know they can make more. In 2019, the true scope and genius of these smugglers was revealed when a 72-foot-long submersible was found in Spain, making this the first known transatlantic drug submarine. Usually, they have a range of a few thousand nautical miles, and most times the subs go from Colombia to Mexico, not to Spain. Just from Mexico to Spain is over 10,000 miles, and that's if you do a straight shot. With that kind of range, the cartels and smugglers have a lot more options on where to put their product, which proves how smart they're getting to avoid modern detecting techniques. Number 4. Shipping pallets. One group had a very clever plan to smuggle their product into a country. They realized that they didn't need to ship the items in various other items to hide them. They just needed to hide them in plain sight via wooden pallets. Wooden pallets are a staple of the shipping world, and if you do it right, no one is going to think that wood is something other than wood. And so they used a special process to compress the cocaine, making it look like a bunch of wooden pallets, and then ship them off to their destination. By the admission of those who found it, it would have worked if they had been sent to a different port. Because the one dumb thing these people did was send it to the port in Spain, where drug trafficking isn't known, it's expected to be clever. So when their drug dogs sniffed the pallets, they knew that the wood likely wasn't what they thought it was. Despite the operation being a failure in the sense, the fact that they were able to stuff and compress 1.4 tons of cocaine into the form of a wooden pallet is very impressive. Number 3. The tunnelers. This may seem like an odd tactic, but if done correctly, using a tunnel to smuggle drugs can be quite effective. For decades, people have been using tunnels to smuggle things across various borders and have only rarely been caught, and the drug trade uses this technique to this day. In Arizona, a drug bust was made in 2018 during a routine traffic stop. The stop yielded over $1 million worth of drugs. After investigating where the man came from, authorities were in for a shock because this person had been getting the drugs directly from Mexico by a 600-foot tunnel that went from a closed fast food restaurant to a private home across the border. One of the drugs that were confiscated in the stop included 261 pounds of methamphetamine, 14 pounds of cocaine, 30 pounds of white heroin, 13.7 pounds of brown heroin, and 6.8 pounds of fentanyl. That's just one instance of a tunnel being used to smuggle items. In January 2019, multiple tunnels of various lengths were found at the border of the United States and Mexico. Countries like Bosnia, Germany, and even the United Kingdom have had various issues with these kinds of tunnels over the years because they tend to only be discovered once they have been used for a very long time. Some of the tunnels that have been found have even been discovered to have electricity running through them to power lights to guide the way for those using them. Number 2. Pablo Escobar. Pablo Escobar was a man whose fame and power were earned because of his incredible ability to get product all over the world despite the world trying to stop him. During the 1980s, Escobar and his cartel suppliers were some of the richest people in the world. Their cocaine trade was supplying America with 80% of its product. They were making over $400 million a week because of their trade. And at the time, the Colombian government didn't do much. Then, after certain life-and-death events, they led to a raid on one of their warehouses and confiscated 13.8 metric tons of cocaine, dealing a $1.2 billion blow to the cartel. What people didn't realize at the time was that this was just a drop in the bucket for the legendary smuggler, who not only got out of those charges, he stayed active for many years after the bust. Then, when he was arrested again and seemingly ready to be put down in terms of his activities, he used his connections and money to quite literally break out of his own house, which he was in by house arrest, and go on the run. It's true that he was eventually killed while on the run, but in many ways, he had already won by that point. He almost single-handedly created the drug trade in regards to cocaine in America, and by the end of his life, even with everything going on, he was worth about $30 billion, an amount, by the way, that was not fully recovered. Number 1. El Chapo. Joaquin Archibaldo Guzman Lora is the regular name of the man who brought all sorts of drugs into the United States and other countries, but you likely know him by his other name, El Chapo, which isn't the most intimidating name ever for the simple reason that it means shorty. But that didn't stop him from becoming one of the most powerful and richest men in the world, as well as starting one of the deadliest wars in Mexico's history just to make himself richer and his business bigger. He was the head of the Sinaloa cartel, which was the cartel that brought things like cocaine, marijuana, methamphetamine, and heroin over the border into the United States. It was here that he started to make his millions, because he helped craft a plethora of elaborate and clever ways to get them across the border without getting caught, including using submarines, tunnels, and more. This made him a billionaire over time, and his cartel was one of the most lucrative and powerful in the world. But arguably, what set El Chapo as one of, if not the smartest drug smuggler in the world and history, is that he was willing to do anything and wait as long as it took for him to get out of any predicament that he found himself in, such as when he got arrested in 2001 and over the course of time used his wealth and intimidation to plan an escape attempt, one that involved using $2 million to bribe 78 different people and getting some things made to get him out. Then, in 2015, he was arrested again, yet he used a shower and a construction tunnel to once again escape. Finally, in 2017, he was arrested, extradited to the United States, and sentenced to a life in prison and forced to pay $12.6 billion, which he had by his various assets, in regards to restitution for what he had done. Still, despite his capture, his prominence was enough to make him a legend, and one of the smartest smugglers ever. Thanks for watching. What did you think of these legendary smugglers? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!